Presenting our podcast, Got Milk, the Indian Dairy Context, brought to you by Shunya Agritech, India's first animal nutrition and well-being focused organization. Say hello to your hosts, Gear and Sahil.
Okay, so, for this deep dive, you sent us a whole bunch of stuff on livestock and poultry management in India.
Yeah, looks like you went deep.
Oh, we did. We really did. And, it was really interesting. I learned a lot. And I'm hoping we can kind of pull out some of the most interesting and useful things for you guys.
Definitely. I mean, your sources are so comprehensive. There's stuff on everything from, how to vaccinate poultry and how to spot when your animals are in heat.
Oh, yeah, like the whole thing, right?
Yeah. And then, all these different breeds that are found across India. And then we get into the real nitty-gritty of it, like how to house them, what to feed them, how to keep them healthy, and even some DNA replication.
Yeah, that was interesting. How did traits get passed down? It all comes back to the DNA, right? So, our goal today in this whole deep dive is to give you a really, really good overview, a comprehensive overview, but in a fun way. We don't want to bog you down with a ton of information, but we do want to give you a solid foundation, especially about the different breeds and how to keep them healthy and productive.
Right.
And hopefully along the way, you'll have those aha moments, oh, I never knew that. So let's just jump right in. Why don't we start with poultry health and management? Your sources really emphasized vaccination.
Yeah, I mean, that's super important. Vaccination, it's like the bedrock of poultry health. It's the main way we protect them from all kinds of threats, from bacteria to viruses to parasites.
It's giving them a little suit of armor.
Exactly, yeah. It basically teaches their immune systems to recognize and fight off these bad guys.
It looks like there's a bunch of different kinds of vaccines.
That's right. You've got your live vaccines, and then you've got your inactivated vaccines, which are also called killed vaccines. And then there's this new-ish kind of vaccine called live recombinant vaccines.
Each type sort of does the job in a slightly different way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you've got to choose the right one depending on what you're trying to protect against. And then the other thing to think about is, how are you going to actually administer the vaccine?
Oh, yeah. How do you actually give it to the birds?
Right. So there are two main approaches. One is individual vaccination, where you basically give each bird its own little dose. And then there's mass vaccination, where you can use sprays or eye drops or nose drops or even put the vaccine in their water.
So I guess with individual vaccination, you know exactly how much each bird is getting.
Yeah. That's the big advantage. You can control the dosage really precisely, but it can be a real pain. It takes a lot of time. You need a lot of people to do it, and it can be stressful for the birds.
And probably expensive too, right?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely more expensive, and then there's always the risk that you're going to accidentally hurt the bird if you're not careful.
If you're giving them an injection.
Right. So there are two main types of injections. Subcutaneous, which is under the skin, and intramuscular, which is into the muscle. And they usually give those in the leg or the breast or the neck.
Okay.
And sometimes they even put dye in the vaccine so they can tell which birds have been vaccinated.
Oh, that's smart. A little visual marker.
Yeah, exactly. But, with needles, you always have to be super careful about hygiene. You don't want to spread any infections.
Right.
So you've got to change the needles regularly, every 500 chicks or so. And you've got to keep them clean.
Mm. And, I bet there's a risk of the person giving the injection accidentally poking themselves too.
Oh, definitely. That's always a concern. But they're developing some needle-free technologies, which are pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. I bet those are helpful. So what about the mass vaccination methods, like the sprays and stuff?
Well, those are definitely a lot quicker and easier, especially when you've got a huge flock of birds. You can vaccinate them all at once. But the downside is that you don't have as much control over the dosage.
You can't make sure each bird is getting the exact right amount.
Right. You just kind of have to hope it all evens out. And you've got to be really careful about how you mix the vaccine and how you distribute it.
I see.
If you're using the water method, you've got to make sure all the birds are actually drinking the water. And you've got to make sure the vaccine is mixed in properly.
Okay.
And then with sprays, you got to make sure the spray is reaching all the birds.
Right.
And, the sources actually give a couple of examples of vaccination schedules.
Oh, yeah. What were those?
So for Marek's disease, they usually vaccinate on day 1 with an intramuscular injection. And then for Rannicate disease, they can vaccinate between 1 and 7 days of age, and they can use any of those mass methods we were talking about. But there's one important thing to remember. If you're using a mass method for Rannicate, You have to use a specific strain of the vaccine called a mesogenic strain. Otherwise, it won't be effective.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. And then the other really important thing is vaccine storage.
Oh, yeah, like keeping it cold, right?
Exactly. Most poultry vaccines have to be stored at a very specific temperature, usually between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius.
Like in a fridge.
Yeah, like a special vaccine fridge. And you have to make absolutely sure that the temperature stays within that range. Otherwise, the vaccine might not work.
So I guess like all this effort with vaccination, it must be worth it in the end, right?
Oh, it totally is. It's a no-brainer for poultry farmers. I mean, if you have a good vaccination program, your birds are going to be way healthier, they're going to grow better, they're going to lay more eggs.
And it's probably going to save them money in the long run too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because you're preventing diseases, you're not going to have to spend as much on treatment.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it's really an investment in the long-term health and profitability of your flock.
Okay, so we've talked about keeping those chicks safe with vaccines. Now let's move on to the next stage, like how to get them off to a good start with brooding.
Right. Yeah. So brooding is all about keeping those little chicks warm, especially in those first 3 to 4 weeks of life.
Because they're still kind of fragile, right?
Yeah, exactly. They can't really regulate their own body temperature yet, so they need a little extra help.
I see. And there are different ways to provide that heat, right?
Yeah, there are two main systems. You've got hot room brooding, where you basically heat up the whole room to the right temperature. And then you've got localized heat, where you use something like a hover or an infrared lamp to create a warm spot for the chicks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And there are probably pros and cons to each system.
Yeah, definitely. Like hot room brooding is good if you have a lot of chicks spread out over a large area, but it can be more expensive to heat the whole room. And with localized heat, it's easier to control the temperature in specific areas, but you've got to make sure the chicks have enough space to move around and not get too crowded under the heat source.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about infrared brooding specifically?
Oh, infrared brooding is pretty neat. It has some definite advantages over traditional heat lamps. For one thing, it makes it easier to actually see the chicks.
Why is that?
Because with a heat lamp, you've got this big hover hanging down and it can block your view. But with infrared lamps, the heat source is more focused so you can see what's going on.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And infrared light also has this cool germicidal effect.
Like it kills germs.
Yeah, basically. It helps keep the environment cleaner. And it's also thought to help the chicks synthesize vitamin D.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and infrared bulbs tend to last longer than traditional heat lamps, so you're saving money in the long run. And some studies even suggest that infrared brooding can help reduce cannibalism among the chicks.
Really? That's interesting. Like less pecking each other.
Yeah, exactly. They think it has to do with the way the infrared light affects their behavior.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, so we've talked about keeping them warm, but there's also a lot of prep work that needs to be done before the chicks even arrive, right? Like getting the shed ready.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You got to make sure the shed is clean and disinfected. And ideally, you should have a downtime of at least 3 to 4 weeks between batches of chicks.
Like to give the place a good cleaning and let any lingering germs die off, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then once you've got the shed all cleaned up, you need to set up a brooder guard.
And what's a brooder guard?
It's basically a temporary fence that you put around the heat source, like a 5-foot circle for 200 to 250 chicks.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it keeps the chicks contained near the heat and helps them stay warm.
So it's like kind of like a playpen for baby chicks.
Yeah, exactly. And then once the chicks arrive, you've got to give them some special care in those first few days.
Like what kind of care?
Well, for the first 2 or 3 days, you want to give them water that's been supplemented with electrolytes, glucose, and vitamins. It helps them rehydrate after transport and get a good start.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you usually give them a short course of antibiotics just to prevent any infections.
So lots of TLC for those baby chicks.
Yeah, they need it.
And temperature management seems really important during that initial brooding period, right?
Oh, yeah, it's critical. In the first week, you want the temperature to be around 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And then each week, you lower it by about 5 degrees until it reaches room temperature.
Like you're gradually weaning them off the heat.
Exactly. And this helps them develop their own ability to regulate their body temperature.
That makes sense. And light is important too, isn't it?
Yeah, during brooding, you usually give them about 23 hours of light and only 1 hour of darkness each day.
Wow, that's a lot of light.
Yeah, it helps them grow and encourages them to eat. And the short period of darkness is important because it gets them used to the idea that the lights might go out sometimes.
So they won't panic if there's a power outage.
Exactly.
Smart. So we've talked about keeping them healthy and warm, but now let's delve into the fascinating world of, like, chicken breeds.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how many different kinds of chickens there are in India.
And your sources talked about some of these indigenous breeds that are known for being super tough.
Right. Like they've adapted over centuries to the local conditions, and they're really good at surviving in all kinds of environments.
Like, they don't need to be pampered.
Yeah, they're tough cookies. Like, we're talking about breeds like the Asil, the Kadaknath, the Chittagong, the Buzra, and the Pradaptan. They're all known for being really hardy and disease resistant.
Oh, yeah, the Kadaknath. That's the one with the black meat and eggs, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
And it's super popular because people think it has medicinal properties.
Really? I mean, it's definitely unique.
Oh, yeah. And then there's the Chittagong, which is a big dual-purpose breed.
What does dual purpose mean?
It means they're good for both meat and eggs.
Oh.
Yeah, and the Chittagong is really common in the rural areas of northeastern India.
And your sources mentioned a couple more breeds from Assam, too, right?
Yeah, the Basra, which is raised for both meat and eggs. And then there's another one called the Frizzle.
The Frizzle.
That sounds cute.
Yeah, they have these really cool curled feathers. They're more of an ornamental breed, though.
Oh, like more for show?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So what's the, big takeaway about all these indigenous Indian poultry breeds?
Well, the big thing is their hardiness. They're really well suited to the local conditions. They're resistant to diseases, and they're a really important part of the rural economy.
They're like survivors.
Yeah, exactly. They're a really valuable genetic resource.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And, you also have some exotic breeds in India, too, like the Silky, which is this really fluffy chicken.
I send pictures of those. They're adorable.
Yeah, they are.
So I guess, when it comes to housing poultry, there are different levels of intensity, right? Yeah, you've got your intensive systems where the birds are kept indoors, and then you've got your more extensive systems where they have more space to roam around.
Like free range.
Yeah, exactly. But your sources mainly focus on the intensive systems.
Okay.
Yeah. And within those, you've got cage systems and deep litter systems.
Okay, yeah, what's the difference?
Well, cage systems are pretty self-explanatory, right? The birds are kept in cages. And deep litter systems, the birds are housed on a thick layer of litter material, like sawdust or rice hulls.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And deep litter systems are often seen as being a bit more humane because the birds have more space to move around.
And the litter itself can actually provide some nutrients, right?
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about deep litter systems. The litter can support the growth of beneficial microorganisms that produce something called animal protein factor, or APF.
Okay, what is that?
Well, it's basically a source of protein for the birds.
Like from the poop and stuff?
Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of. It's from the breakdown of the litter material and the bird droppings. And some research suggests that if the deep litter is managed really well, the birds might be able to get enough APF from it that you could actually reduce the amount of protein you need to add to their feed.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Like
Why?
making their own protein supplement.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
So it's like kind of a natural way to recycle nutrients.
Exactly.
So even with all the preventative measures like vaccines and good hygiene, unfortunately, diseases can still happen, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. And your sources list a whole bunch of common poultry diseases.
Okay, like what?
Well, there's fowl cholera, which is a bacterial infection that can be really deadly. And then there's Marek's disease, which is a viral disease that causes tumors.
Oh, wow, that sounds scary.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious disease. And then there's salmonellosis, which is another bacterial disease, and it can actually be transmitted to humans.
Oh, so it's zoonotic.
Right, exactly. And then there's E. coli infection, which can cause a bunch of problems, especially in young birds. And finally, there's coccidiosis, which is a parasitic disease.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of these diseases can cause significant economic losses for poultry farmers. So it's really important to be vigilant and take steps to prevent them.
Yeah, it sounds like vaccination is a key strategy here.
Oh, absolutely. It's the best way to protect your birds from these diseases. And good biosecurity practices are really important too.
Yeah, like preventing the spread of germs.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about poultry. Now let's switch gears and talk about cattle and buffalo. I mean, India has such an incredible diversity of breeds.
Oh, it's amazing. Centuries of selective breeding have resulted in all these different breeds that are adapted to different parts of the country and different production systems.
Yeah, and your sources categorize Indian cattle breeds based on their purpose, right? Like whether they're good for milk or meat or draft work.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got your Milch breeds, which are the best milk producers. And then you've got your Ghoul purpose breeds, which are good for both milk and draft work. And then you've got your draft breeds, which are primarily used for their strength and power.
Oh.
Yeah, and within each of those categories, you've got a whole bunch of different breeds, each with its own unique characteristics.
Like, what are some examples of the milch breeds?
Well, some of the most famous ones are the Gur, the Sahiwal, the Red Sindhi, and the Rothi. They're all known for producing a lot of milk.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Gur is particularly well known for its high butterfat content, which makes it really good for making ghee.
Oh, yeah. Ghee is delicious.
Yeah, it is.
And what about the dual-purpose breeds?
Some of the most common dual-purpose breeds are the Haryana, the Tharparkar, the Kankarej, the Ongol, and the Krishnavali. They're all good for both milk and work, but they might not produce as much milk as the dedicated milch breeds.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And your sources had a lot of detail about specific breeds too, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Tons of information. Like, for example, there's the Dione breed, which is black and white and speckled, and it's a pretty good milk producer. And its bullocks are also good for draft work.
I see.
Yeah. And then there's the Halakar, which is gray, and it's known for being really good for draft work. Like, they're strong and they can trot really well.
Well, that's interesting. Like a trotting cow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay.
And then there's the Kandanyam, which is another draft breed. The bulls are dark gray and the cows are gray or white. And they're known for being really hardy and well suited for plowing and transportation.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you've got the Haryana, which is a good all-around breed. They're good for work. And the cows produce a decent amount of milk.
Like a good, reliable breed.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the Kangaraj, which is sometimes called the Wadad or Waged. They have these really impressive horns, and the bullocks are super strong and fast. And the cows are pretty good milk producers, too.
So they're like a high-performing breed.
Yeah, for sure.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget about buffaloes.
Oh, yeah. India has a ton of different buffalo breeds, too. And they can be classified in different ways, like by their size or by their region.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got your large breeds, your medium breeds, and your small breeds. And then you've got breeds from different parts of India, like the northwestern breeds and the central breeds.
Oh, I see. So, like, what are some examples of large buffalo breeds?
Well, some of the most famous ones are the Murrah, the Nili Ravi, the Jaffrabadi, and the Bani. They're all known for being really good milk producers.
And the Jaffrabadi is the one that can fight off lions.
Yeah, that's the one. They're huge and powerful.
Wow, they must be intimidating.
Oh, yeah, they are. And then there's the Masana, which is a medium-sized breed that's known for being really well adapted and productive.
Like, they can handle a variety of conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the Nagpuri, which is another medium-sized breed, and they're known for being really good draft animals. Like, they're strong and they don't need a lot of care.
Low maintenance.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so we've got these different types of cattle and buffalo breeds, but what about other animals, like goats? Are there specific Indian goat breeds too?
Oh, definitely. Like, there's the Chegu goat, which is from the Himalayan region, and it's known for producing pashmina wool.
Oh, that's the really soft, expensive wool, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the Gatti goat, which is also from the Himalayas, and it's a really hardy breed that's good for both meat and hair.
Okay.
And then there's the Jamunapari, which is the largest goat breed in India, and it's known for its distinctive Roman nose.
A Roman nose, like curved.
Yeah, like a bump on their nose. It's pretty distinctive, and they're good for both milk and meat.
Interesting. And what about pigs? Are there any Indian pig breeds?
Yeah, there are a few. Like, there's the Gungru pig from North Bengal, and they're known for having big litters. And then there's the Banda pig, which is from Jharkhand, and they're known for their burrowing behavior. And they're actually good for meat because they're pretty lean.
Lean pork.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about all these different breeds of cattle, buffalo, goats, and pigs. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a really important management aspect. Heat detection.
Right, yeah. So heat detection is all about figuring out when your female animals are ready to breed.
So you can time the breeding correctly.
Exactly. And the signs of heat can vary depending on the animal.
Okay, so, like, what should you look for in goats?
Well, there are a few key things. First, you might notice that their vulva is swollen and red, and they might be more restless than usual, and they might bleat a lot more. They also might urinate more frequently, and you might see some mucus discharge from their vulva.
Okay, so those are all physical signs.
Right. And then there are some behavioral signs, too. Like, they might be really interested in the males, or they might try to mount other females.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes they even lose their appetite, and their milk production might drop.
Really, it's like they're completely focused on mating.
Yeah, exactly. And one way to really tell if a doe is in heat is to use a teaser buck.
What's a teaser buck?
It's basically a male goat that's been vasectomized. So he can't actually impregnate the females, but he can still stimulate them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so if you put a teaser buck in with a group of does, the ones that are in heat will really respond to him.
Smart. And what about sheep? What are the signs of heat in ewes?
Well, the heat period in ewes is actually pretty short, usually only 1 to 3 days. And they usually come into heat every 15 to 19 days.
Okay.
Yeah, and unlike some breeds of sheep that only breed during certain times of year, a lot of the tropical broods in India can breed all year round.
So it's important to be paying attention all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And then with pigs, there are a few different signs you can look for.
Okay, like what?
Well, you might notice that their vulva is swollen and red, and you might see some mucus discharge, and their vaginal pH will actually change, and they might have more white blood cells in their vaginal secretions.
Wow, that's getting pretty technical.
Yeah, but there are some easier signs to look for too, like they might lose their appetite, and they might start trying to mount other females. Yeah, or they might let other females mount them. But the most reliable sign of heat in pigs is something called the lordosis reflex.
What's that?
It's basically when the female stands still and arches her back.
Like she's ready to mate.
Yeah, exactly. And you can usually trigger this reflex by pressing down on her back or by bringing a boar near her.
Oh, I see. So you can actually test it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to know the signs of heat for each species so you can time the breeding correctly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And, another important management aspect, especially with pigs, is weaning.
Oh, yeah, like when you separate the piglets from the sow.
Exactly. And traditionally, piglets are weaned at around 8 weeks of age.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's a trend towards weaning them earlier these days, sometimes as early as 3 weeks of age.
Really? Why is that?
Well, there are a few reasons. For one thing, it allows the sow to have more litters per year.
Oh, because she's not nursing for as long.
Exactly. And it can also lead to faster growth rates in the piglets because they're switched to a more nutritious diet sooner.
Okay.
Yeah, and early weaning can also help reduce the amount of weight the sow loses during lactation.
Oh, because she's not producing as much milk.
Exactly. So it can be good for the sow's health, too, but there are some downsides to early weaning, too.
Like what?
Well, you have to be really careful about managing the piglets. Like, you need to make sure they're in a clean environment, and you need to give them a really good starter feed that's specifically formulated for young pigs.
Oh, yeah, because they're not getting their mother's milk anymore.
Right. So it requires a bit more work, but it can have some real benefits.
Interesting. So we've covered breeding and weaning. Now let's move on to another really important aspect of livestock management, housing.
Right. Yeah. Housing is super important because it provides shelter for the animals, protects them from the elements, and helps to keep them healthy and productive.
And there are different types of housing depending on the animals and the climate, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like for dairy cattle, you might have cow houses or sheds that are designed to provide shade and ventilation in hot climates. Yeah, and these sheds can be arranged in different ways, like single row or double row or head to head or tail to tail.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then you might also have tie stalls, which give the cows a bit more freedom of movement than traditional stanchions.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those. It's like they have a chain around their neck, but they can still move around a bit.
Right, exactly. And then you also need special areas for calving and for sick animals and for young stock.
Like a maternity ward and an infirmary.
Yeah, kind of. And then when you're designing these structures, there are all kinds of things to consider.
Like what?
Well, you need to think about the width of the walkways so the animals and people can move around easily. And you need to think about the size of the feed alleys so they can all eat comfortably. And you need to make sure the floor slopes properly so it drains well and stays clean. And the doors need to be big enough for the animals to get through easily.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of planning goes into designing livestock housing.
Oh, it definitely does. And then there are also specific recommendations for things like calving pens. Like, you want to move pregnant cows into these pens a few weeks before they're due to calve. And these pens should be a good size with plenty of bedding and good ventilation.
So it's comfortable for the mother and the calf.
Yeah, exactly. And, even though we talked about intensive systems for poultry, like cages and deep litter, there are some general housing principles that apply to all livestock.
Okay, like what?
Well, you always want to make sure the housing is functional and efficient. It should be easy to clean and manage, and it should provide a comfortable and healthy environment for the animals.
Right.
Yeah. And it should also be environmentally sustainable, so it's not having a negative impact on the surrounding environment.
Like using sustainable materials and minimizing waste.
Exactly. And of course, it should be safe for both the animals and the people who work with them.
Safety first.
Yeah, always. And then there's also the economic aspect. You want to make sure the housing is affordable to build and maintain.
Right. It has to be practical.
Yeah, for sure. And in some cases, you might even want to consider the aesthetics of the housing, like how it looks in the surrounding landscape.
Of like making it blend in.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a whole holistic approach to livestock housing.
Yeah, you've got to think about all the different aspects. And, the first step in all of this is choosing the right site for your livestock operation.
Oh, yeah. Location, location, location.
Exactly. And there are a ton of factors to consider when choosing a site, like the topography, the drainage, the soil type, the availability of water, access to utilities, zoning regulations, biosecurity risks, proximity to neighbors, and the potential for expansion.
Wow. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a big decision.
Okay. So we've talked about where the animals live. Now let's talk about what they eat. The feedstuffs.
Right, yeah. Nutrition is obviously super important for livestock. I mean, it affects their health, their growth, their reproduction, their milk production, everything.
It's like you are what you eat. Right.
Yeah, pretty much. And livestock feeds are basically divided into two main categories: concentrates and roughages.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, concentrates are high in nutrients and low in fiber. Think grains like cereals and millets and oilseed cakes, which are what's left over after you extract oil from seeds.
Okay.
Yeah, and roughages are low in nutrients and high in fiber.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of Got Milk, the Indian Dairy Context. Subscribe to the podcast. And a reminder, this episode was brought to you by Shunya Agritech, India's first animal nutrition and well-being focused organization. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.